Before we get rolling into it for tonight, let's pray together. Dearest Lord God, it is such a privilege to gather together on a Wednesday night in a nice warm building and be with brothers and sisters to study about you and about the places that you've created and the things that you've done in history. And so, Lord, as we come to this class tonight, I pray that you just give us a level of excitement and anticipation for what you have prepared for us this evening. I pray, Lord, that we would be quick to learn more about you. Lord, it's not about geography, it's not about history that we are interested, it is about you. And so we want to know more about you through the things that you have done and the places that you've made on this earth. So, Lord, I pray that you would give us attention tonight, that you would help us to be very attentive to what your Spirit is saying to us, that we would recall a lot of the things that you're going to give to us tonight, but also, Lord, that we would, with our hearts, worship you through more knowledge of you as well. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we also have a fellowship night tonight. Don't want to forget that. We're going to finish about 15 minutes early, and there's going to be some snacks out here on the Grace Walk behind us. And so try to remind me to finish a little bit early for that. It's one of the things I enjoy the most is fellowship nights, so I really want you to get out there and enjoy that, standing in line and waiting for donuts to be made for you. But also socializing with your neighbors and talking about the wonderful things you've learned about in historical geography tonight, too. So here we go. Why study historical geography of the Holy Land? This is the setting for the Bible. That's what I really want to talk with you about, is setting. And if you've taken hermeneutics with me, or Bible 1 or Bible 2, we talk a lot about setting. And we talk about the fact that it's important for understanding the biblical world, that we know the times and places where God chose to reveal himself. There's just something about having a concrete feel for what the places that God talks about in Scripture that really help you to absorb the content as well, right? And so that's one of the things I want to try to convince you of in this class to demonstrate for you. I know not all of you have been to Israel or will get a chance to go to Israel this time or maybe even ever, but we're going to try to do our best to approximate that in this class. So I'm going to have pictures and videos and timelines and all kinds of things to try to get you as close as I can to actually walking where Jesus walked and other places of our biblical history as well. God chose a particular time and place and people through which he would reveal himself to us. This is real history. And the more I think about it and the more I've got a chance to travel to Israel, you guys, the more that I think that we really do have in our minds the idea is that this is just stories, that this is like fairy tales. And you don't even maybe realize to what extent you're kind of thinking and feeling that way until you actually get to a concrete place and you say, oh, this is a real place on a real planet with real people that God chose to reveal himself in. And so I really want to convince you of that this is not Lord of the Rings, right? This is actual, real, historical events, places, people that are recorded for us in Scripture. And God chose them for his own purposes. And so in this class, really our major purpose is to show you how an understanding of the setting of the Bible gives you a better understanding of the events of the Bible. And why did these things take place in these places? Why did God choose this time and these places to reveal himself? So many have said that it gives you a new Bible if you understand the setting of the Bible. And so it's not that the contents will change necessarily, but you will change enough so that you will see them in a different light. And that will give you a zeal for studying the Bible that you've never had before. And I know that those who have done this before know that has been true for them too. So those of you who are preparing for Israel, this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime trip for you. Dr. Bookman, who is my mentor in these trips, has said that it's too bad that you have to go to Israel for a first time. Because going for the first time is overwhelming. You get a lot of information, you go to a lot of different places, and it's in a very short and compact amount of time. So it's really disorienting the first time you go. The second time, you're already a little bit oriented, and so it's much easier to absorb things. So I wish you could go not just for a first time, but a second time. And actually, my experience has been that everybody who goes for his first time, even within days, they're saying, the next time I come to Israel, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So they're already thinking about a second trip to Israel. So there's no way to take it all in less than the 2 weeks. And that's what we get, is about 2 weeks of our trip there. Your entire brain capacity is not enough to take in everything that you're going to have a chance to see. That's why we do this class, for those of you especially going to Israel, is to give you a shot at a first time walking through the material, so that when you get there, you can concentrate a little bit more on being there rather than just listening to everything that I'm going to say, droning on and on and on through your microphone and your earpiece, okay? So I want to give you at least 2 shots at absorbing the material. One before you get there, and then one while you're there. And I know I'm only speaking to some of you, because not all of you are going to get to go. But those of you who have already gone, I think you're probably experiencing the fact that some has already faded. If it's a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, even 6 months ago that you were in Israel last time, you're going to find that things fade over time. And they kind of run together in your memory about where you were, what you saw, what you did. And so this might be a chance to reclaim some of those things that you may have forgotten over the last few months. And so that's another reason maybe to take a class like this. Those of you who with no plans to go to Israel, don't panic, don't worry. You're still welcome to be in class. I still love to have you here. And we will get you as close as we can in this class to actually experiencing it. So that's our plan. What is historical geography? Let me tell you a little bit about that. Physical geography does change over time, right? Things change, even in this area, in California particularly. Fires and floods and erosion change the landscape over time. And also history is something that is just interesting to us too. Times and places and governments, all those things change over history. And so that you might think that historical geography is about those 2 things, about change in places and in history. That's not exactly what we want to talk about in here. We want an understanding of how geography brings some insight into what happened and why it happened in these particular places. A major theme for us in this class is going to be how God orchestrated these events in these places. I want you to have that word orchestrated in your mind, because God is in control of all of human history. He's in control of not just the events that take place, but the creation of places for those events to take place on. And so God orchestrated a particular time and a particular place for his revelation to take the stage. And so that's what we want to look at in this class. You've got the syllabus there in front of you. I want to walk through it with you quickly here, not spend a lot of time on it, but a little bit. Again, at the top of this page, it tells you this is Historical Geography of the Holy Land, part of Grace Chapel Bible Institute, a special course in our sequence there. I am going to be your professor, Brad Hayen, and I have been pastor of Christian education here at Grace Chapel for about 11 years. Michael Rice is down here in front as well, and he's going to be helping us out as well. He's going to be teaching some of the sessions along the way and giving us actually some insight into some other things as well. So he's going to take some of the sessions when I'm out of town, but also parts of some of the sessions while we're in town too. So I'm excited about teaching that with Michael. If anybody hasn't heard Michael teach before, he's a really good teacher, and we're glad to have him on staff, and it's really fun to have somebody else to teach along with me. I begrudgingly give up some of my class periods, and he knows that, but I just like teaching it so much that it's hard for me to give it up, but that's okay. I'll try really hard to give you up more than I'm comfortable giving up to you. Well, Michael, how about that? I give you my email address there, bhayen@gclancaster.com, and that's just because in a class like this, you might not feel comfortable talking or asking a question in front of everybody, or you might run out of time, or you might think of a question after you leave here, and that's one of the things I love about email, is that it's not time sensitive, right? You can write it when I'm asleep, and then I can read it when I'm awake, right? Or vice versa. So I really like that. If you're up in the middle of the night and wanting to ask a question, better not call my cell phone, better to write an email to me. The other thing I love about email is that I can give you a thoughtful answer. It's not just coming off the cuff, right? I can look at it, I can think about it, and then I can write you a thoughtful answer. For me, when I get an email, the average time I spend on answering an email is about an hour and a half. I try to do it thoughtfully, unless it's a very simple question, and oftentimes when somebody writes me an email, it's not a very simple question. So I want to give a very thoughtful answer to a thoughtful question, right? And sometimes that takes quite a bit of time. So I'm willing to give you that kind of attention. I don't get a lot of email questions, but I'm just opening that door to you. Please use that. You're welcome to ask me anything about historical geography, about Old Testament, New Testament, about whatever you want to ask me about. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up for you. So no problem with that at all. Or Michael will make something up. I'll pass it off to him. If I don't know the answer, I'll pass it off to Michael, and he can deal with it. All right, course objective, let me just read this for you quickly. The objective of this class will be to develop the student's understanding of the land of Israel and its history in relationship to the Bible. We will aim to apply our learning both to the personal life and to the ministry of the student. And those of you who have been in my classes before know that I'm going to stop there with that word ministry, because you also know that's probably something you don't think a lot about. Like if I just walked up behind you and I said, how's your ministry going? Most of you would look at me and say, I don't have a ministry. And I would look back at you and kind of smile a little bit, and I would say, well, if you're a Christian, you have a ministry. You are called to be in ministry, and what you do with your life is ministry. The question isn't whether or not you're doing ministry, it's how well you're doing ministry biblically. And when I'm talking about ministry, I mean even the thoughts and things that you say to yourself. Right? What advice do you give to yourself? How do you criticize yourself? Do you do it biblically, or do you do it from some other point of view? And so that's one of my goals with the Bible Institute, is to help you think biblically about everything that you do in life, including the advice you give to yourself, but certainly how you relate to your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, everybody you come across in your life, because that is your job as a Christian, is to be in ministry to the people around you. Okay, and so I'm going to try to convince you of that throughout the courses that we teach, and try to improve your ability to do ministry by teaching you through Scripture. Okay, and so that's one of the aims for this, is that you would be better at the ministry that you do. And you guys, honestly, knowing something about the Holy Land might open up a lot of different doors to you than other areas of biblical study. I had a neighbor one time when I lived in Portland, and the very first time I got to go to Israel was 2000? 2000? 2000 I went to Israel, yeah, 2000, summer of 2000. And Mandy and I were just about to have our first child there. I think actually he's sitting back there, 19 years old now, Caleb. Was not yet born the first time I got to go, just about to be. And this neighbor was very interested. He was a non-believer. In fact, he said he was an atheist. I convinced him later that he was actually an agnostic, but that's a different conversation. He thought he was an atheist, and so he was asking me, so why in the world did you go to Israel? And I said, that's a great question. And so we spent a lot of hours talking about it before I went. And then I took pictures. In fact, I had one of those cameras that printed directly to those hard disks, those 3.5-inch discs. You guys remember those? You could put a hard disk in there, take about 8 pictures, have it out again. Do you guys remember that? Did you ever see something? Anyway, I remember this is 2000, okay? So now some of you are looking. I actually had one of those discs, and I gave it to one of my kids the other day, and he was pretty excited to see something from a relic from the Stone Age, actually, is what it was probably for him. But then when I got back, I had to show him all these pictures and talk about Israel with them. And then talking about Israel with them opened up doors to all kinds of other conversations. And so it was really, really fun. So you might find that same kind of thing through something like this. And Israel is on the news, even yesterday, day before, right? That area of the world is on people's minds. And so if you get a chance to talk about that with people, this is current events and real life too. So I really do think it opens up opportunities for ministry within your own family, friends, and with even strangers or people who just have an interest in Israel. Okay, I'm preaching. I need to move on because we have to have a fellowship night tonight too. So this course is a special offering of GCBI and is not part of the regular curriculum. It is especially geared to those who are preparing to go to Israel or who have already been. We want students to be prepared for what they will encounter there because we believe it will maximize the benefit of their trip. Like I said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip, so I want to maximize that benefit for you guys. Course dates, the class will meet at Grace Chapel on Wednesday evenings like we're doing tonight, January 8th through May 20th, which brings us up very close to the day we leave for Israel, which is June 16th? 14th, June 14th. Here's some goals: to honor the Lord through study and application of His Word. Number 2 is to better understand God's working in history by understanding the stage on which He chose to display it. Number 3, to develop understanding of the chronological flow of the Bible, and that's actually a big benefit as well. We want to get a chronological flow of the Bible, a big picture kind of view of how the Bible works. And so although we aren't really doing it chronologically in this class, we're going to be going more geographically. We're going to follow a route through the Holy Land, and so you'll come across places that have actually a number of different time significances in Scripture, but you'll still get an overview or a big picture view of how God is working in history, which I think will help you to understand your Bible totally better as well. Make sense to you guys a little bit? Okay, that's my goal at least. We're going to try that. Then fourth, to spark the students' interest in further pursuit of biblical studies. You guys, I think if you have an appreciation for the setting, you're going to want to read the stories more as well of Scripture. Make sense? That they will be more alive to you, and that will spark an interest in you to read more Scripture and to read it differently than you have before. All right, don't worry about the requirements and expectations at this moment. You guys, there are a couple of books that I'd recommend. In fact, we're not going to require it, but thank you for bringing one here. This one is one that I'd recommend to everybody, but especially those who are going to Israel. It's called Journey with Jesus to Israel, and it's kind of a journal It gives a little bit of an overview of the places that we're going to go to, and then gives you spaces to journal in them a little bit. And so we have one copy up here that you can maybe look at afterwards. The author is Dudley Rutherford. If you just look for Journey with Jesus to Israel on Amazon, you'll find it there. It'll be the first one that pops up there as well. Israel notebook, that's actually not going to happen yet. We're going to give you notes just like this each week as you come into class, Lord willing, for that. Second page then, I just want to show you quickly what our schedule looks like, okay? And, again, I have planned this according to the days of our trip in Israel, okay? So we're going to go through as if we're driving in the bus around Israel going to the different places. And I'll show you kind of a map of how that looks a little bit later. And so the class is really laid out by days. And so I've actually split up the days, or the class sessions, into two per day. When we're in Israel, we actually get like 8 or 9 hours to teach. We only get 3 hours in 2 weeks here to teach. So you won't get as much content here as you'll get there and on the bus and all that. But that's the plan. So we'll start in Caesarea Maritima not next week, but the week after. And then we'll eventually make our way all the way to Jerusalem and spend our time there, okay? So it's a kind of a journey by bus through the nation of Israel. All right, any questions about the syllabus? Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, anything like that? Yes?
What's an Israel notebook?
It's irrelevant for us for this. When I wrote the syllabus, I had a different plan. Basically, you're going to get handouts each week, which would be like your Israel notebook. So you don't need to buy anything. It's just the notes you're going to get in class. Just throw those in a notebook, and that will be your Israel notebook. Yeah. Those of you who are going with me to Israel, I'm actually putting together a notebook for you to have while you're there to tour around. There's some prototypes of that floating around. I won't tell you who has them, so you won't mob that person. But I've got some people doing some work on those to bring those up to speed as well. But yeah, don't worry about the Israel notebook. It'll just be the notes that you have in class compiled over time. All right? Other questions? All right. Anybody in the wrong class? You were supposed to be in men's ministry and you found yourself in here and now you're thinking, oh wow, how do I get out of here without everybody like looking at me as I walk out the back door? You guys, you're free to get up and move around now if you want to, and I won't comment on anybody leaving. We won't make fun of you at all. All right, no, everybody's in the right place? Good. This is not choir, you guys. Choir is next door, okay? All right, we're not going to do much singing in here. All right, let's go ahead and start our PowerPoint there, Michael, if you would. Are we having problems with that?
Yeah.
Did it shut down?
It's showing on this, but not up there.
Oh. Did you got it plugged in, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, now it says no.
Okay. Michael will figure this out. And as he's doing so, everybody's looking at Michael's on the spot here. That's fantastic. Good job, Michael. Under pressure, he makes it happen.
I don't know what I did.
He doesn't know? Okay. So you couldn't repeat it if I asked him to, but that's okay. All right. Tonight we're really going to talk about the big picture, okay? And by big picture, the big theme for tonight, just a phrase I want you to remember. When we're talking about Israel, we're going to call it the land between, okay? I didn't come up with that. I don't know who did come up with that, but it's a really good way of understanding Israel and its importance in world history, especially ancient world history. It's the land between, okay? And so I want you to remember that, and it's going to be on your quiz next week too, so that'll be helpful. Highlight that in your notes. Know that you're going to be quizzed on that. It's the land between, and so I want to show you tonight what it is between. And I've given you a set of maps in your notes tonight, and I realize you're going to be kind of taking notes on your front page, and you're going to be wanting to look to other pages, but if you have your second page there, it's going to show you, in fact, Michael, you can go to the next slide there. It's this map. So you can either go, oh yes, please. Notes? Yes, there are more notes, right? Yes, Joe has them. He's coming. He's coming. Oh boy. We got quite a few missing notes. Okay. Yes? Yeah. 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 So our trip this year is full. We had only room for 45 people, and so that's completely full. In fact, we have people on the waiting list for that. So we're aiming towards 2022, and October of 2022 would be the next one. So yeah, like I said, start saving your money towards that now. It's turns out to be about $4,000 per person to go. That includes airfare and stuff. So so if you start saving now, you'd be ready to go in 2022. We don't have plans to go in 2021. It's possible, but we don't have plans for that. The next plan would be 2022. Pastor Chris, our senior pastor, really was trying to get us to alternate every couple of years and do some other things in between. So we don't have a plan to do one in 2021. Right now, it looks at 2022. But there are other trips. I can give you names of good tourist agencies that will arrange a trip for you if you wanted to go in 2021, if that was your only time to go. I can help hook you up with that. If you want to take me along with you, that'd be even nicer. I'll go with you in 2021. I'll go as many times as you guys want, but we're only doing official trips from the church every couple of years. At least that's the plan. Unless I get a bunch of you to go to Pastor Chris and say, you know what? I have to go to Israel in 2021. I have to take Brad with me. And so please, if I get enough people to go to Chris and say that to him, we just might make it happen. So, all right, so land between. And so look at this map up here, or you've got a copy of it in your notes too. And I want to show you the strategic spots that Israel plays on the world stage here, okay? And so there's a couple of big barriers. How do I have it in your notes? 3 continents. Okay, let's talk about the 3 continents first. Okay, if you look up in the upper left hand, if you're looking at it from your point of view, you've got a continent up there, a big one, Europe, right? You guys are familiar with the continent of Europe? Okay, it's a big continent out over there, not quite as big as North America, but and then another big continent, even bigger continent over here to this side is Asia, okay? Then down below you see Africa, okay? So we have 3 continents, and then between them we have Israel, right in this little area right here, okay? Now, ancient history, there's a lot of trade that goes on between Europe and Asia and Africa. But trade is very difficult to do anyway but over land. Okay? The Mediterranean Sea is a huge barrier. In fact, since you've got 3 continents and 2 barriers, we'll talk about those all at once. The Mediterranean Sea is one of those. Think about biblical history, and if you think about all the seafaring that takes place, both Old Testament and New Testament, every time somebody goes out on water, something bad happens, right? You've got floods, you've got shipwrecks, even in Paul's day, right? Every time Paul gets on a ship, he gets shipwrecked, whatever might happen. All kinds of tragedy, difficulty happens in the Mediterranean Sea as a big barrier, okay? And so we might think of the Mediterranean as a great opportunity for shipping between the continents. That was not the case, even up through the 1st century, even up through Jesus' day. It was not easy to travel by Mediterranean. In fact, the seasons played a huge role, right? In the wintertime, it was almost impossible to travel by the Mediterranean and the kind of shipping that they had at that time. And so all throughout ancient history, the Mediterranean really wasn't a highway. It was a barrier to traffic, okay? Then you also had this huge desert. In fact, you can see it down here, the Arabian Desert. And this is the other barrier, okay? The Arabian Desert, if you guys have ever been to a desert, I don't know, has anybody ever been to a desert around here? You guys, oh, you live in a desert. Okay, yeah. So you're familiar with a desert, right? You don't want to be out in a desert with a large group of people, especially an army or a caravan that's transporting goods, right? You've got to feed them, you've got to water them, you've got to keep them comfortable, you've got to keep them alive through a long journey. And so the desert here and the Mediterranean become bookends, barriers that really limit traffic, make it impossible to travel that way. Go to the next slide for us there. And so this little area between the desert and the Mediterranean, and between Asia, Europe, and Africa, it becomes an extremely strategic place. It's a very narrow land bridge between 3 continents, okay, that really controls the traffic. This is where all the traffic wants to go, because this is a nice, flat, coastal plain where you can move an army, a huge army, or you can move a caravan with goods, depending on what you wanted to do there. Okay? And so God put Israel in a very strategic place on the face of the earth to draw attention to them. In fact, the entire world is going to walk through their backyard. You guys ever have a freeway going through your backyard or whatever? You're not real happy to have that traffic flowing through there? Well, Israel, God placed intentionally in a place where people from all over the world would be traveling right by them through a central highway through the ancient world. Okay? And so this is why historical geography is so important. God's choice of this place is what brings them attention. In fact, maybe too much attention at times. It gives them a choice to be made as part of their lives as well. Now I want to talk with you about another concept that makes them in between. Okay? Not only are the 3 continents that surround the nation of Israel, there's also two major empires throughout human history, especially ancient human history, that surround Israel. To the south, down below here, you have Egypt. And we all study ancient Egyptian empires, right? All of the pyramids, all of the power and wealth that was part of ancient Egypt is because it sits at the northeast corner of the continent of Africa. And so it's a very strategic place for an empire to be located because they can control all of the goods that are coming up from Africa to go towards Europe and Asia. Gold, silver, ivory, slaves, all kinds of things were huge commodities down in the country of Africa. Even baboons, elephants, all of these things were traded and trafficked in the ancient world. And so if you can control all of that wealth that's coming up from all of Africa, you can tax it, you can just regulate it, make sure that nobody has control of it. And so that's a very strategic place for you to build an empire, right here at the mouth of that traffic heading up into Asia and Europe from Africa. Make sense? Then you've got the two continents up to the north, Europe and Asia. And there's another major empire, actually it's a number of different empires through ancient history, that control that traffic up here. Okay, so you've got two corks, basically, this cork and this cork, at the top and bottom of that traffic. Okay, so for Europe and Asia, those empires are Assyria and later Babylon, and then Persia. Okay, eventually it will be Greece and then Rome, which will control that whole area. But the empires always want to have control of that route of traffic, because if you can tax it, if you can control it, then you become rich and powerful. Okay? And that's what history is all about, really. If you think about it from a secular point of view, it's about power and wealth and control. And so you've constantly got two major empires that are controlling two different sides of the world there. Okay, you got a little bit of a sense of that? So for the purposes of this class, we're going to call those two major empires cats. Okay? These are the cats of world history. And so Egypt is a cat to the south. Assyria, Babylon, and then later Persia will be cats to the north. Even later, it'll be Greece and Rome that are the cats to the north. And those cats are on the prowl constantly. And what happens when you get two powerful cats in a neighborhood? What do? Yeah, fight and claw and scramble, right? War with each other. We live out in a place where we have a couple of acres worth of land, and we constantly hear stray cats out there fighting over territory, right? And so cats are the big, powerful ones on the block there. The cats, okay? Yes? Egypt to the south, okay? Keep control of that. And then Assyria, Assyria. And then Assyria will eventually become Babylon, or Babylonia. Babylon is Babylon. And then Babylon will eventually become Persia, okay, in ancient history. Eventually, again, the Greeks will come in and overtake all of that empire. And then after them, the Romans will come in and take over all that empire. Okay, so we're talking about thousands of years worth of history. Those empires change names and hands all kinds of different times. But those are the basic ones there, okay? So think about those things in terms of cats. We got the big ones, who are the empires, who are in control of vast amounts of territory and want to be in control of even vaster amounts of territory. And so the cats are always at war with one another. When we come to biblical history, though, we also have what I refer to as mice. Okay, you've got the cats, but you've also got mice. And so in your notes there, you have another map, another map on the third page. In fact, is there another copy of the notes? I don't have that one in my notes. I do. Okay. You see it's a zoomed-in shot. In fact, you can go to it, Michael, I think, on our PowerPoint as well. It's a zoomed-in shot, and now we're just in that little rectangle that we had in the previous one. You see that? Go back one more, Michael, just for a second. You see that rectangle here, this yellow rectangle? Okay, this next slide is going to be a zoom in on that rectangle. And so that's what you are on that one where it says "and mice" at the top. We're now zoomed in, and unfortunately the copy didn't come, the copy with the borders didn't come out all that well, but the borders aren't as important right now as the names on that map, okay? Throughout biblical history, especially Old Testament biblical history, you have a number of different mice. And the mice that we want to think about are the actual immediate neighbors to Israel. We come across them constantly in the Old Testament. These are the peoples of the land of Canaan. And so they're listed oftentimes back to back with each other, right? There'll be a whole list of the peoples of Canaan, the Kenites, the Perizzites, the Amalekites, the Jebusites, and others like that. And so throughout our Old Testament, we're constantly coming in contact with the neighbors in the neighborhood. These are the people who live much closer and are much less powerful than the empires, okay? So these are actually what you would think about as small kingdoms, maybe even city-states within a small little area. Remember we said Israel was about 270 miles long from north to south and about 70 miles wide, so it's not huge. From here to San Diego, well, a little bit more than from here to San Diego wide, long. And from the coast to us, basically, is the size of the land of Israel, okay? So not very big. You can certainly drive from north to south in just a matter of hours, 3 or 4 hours there, okay? So not very big, and all of a sudden now you've got a lot of neighbors who are in that neighborhood as well. And these are, like I said, the mice. And the mice are people like the Amorites, the Moabites, the Amalekites. Can you find them on your map there? And maybe even just circle them as you find them. So these are in larger print there. You see the Canaanites, the Amorites. I'm kind of moving from north to south there. You've got Ammon on the far right, Moab towards the bottom right. Down here, you've got the Kenites, the Amalekites, and the Jebusites right here in the middle. Okay? You would also include Israel and Judah as mice in our Old Testament. Israel is the 12 tribes of Israel initially, the 12 tribes of Israel. Eventually it gets split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and then you just have the 10 tribes up to the north that are called Israel, and then 2 tribes that are left are called Judah. Okay? And we'll get into more of that later on. But these are all the mice that we're talking about here. Okay? And what we find as we're walking through biblical history, when the cats are strong, then the mice are weak, right? And really what they're about is hiding, making themselves as small as possible, right? If you've got a cat in the room, what are all the mice going to do? They're going to find their holes and retreat into their own private, comfortable, secure places. And that's what happens in biblical history as well. When you have strong empires, either the Assyrians or the Babylonians or both, or the Egyptians or all of those, if they're all strong, then what you find is that what the mice do is either hide or try to band together to keep the cats from invading their territory. Okay? It's either all mice for themselves or let's band together and try to get rid of that cat. Right? If we can all get together, then maybe we can keep the cat out of our territory. Okay? The other thing that might happen is that when the cats get weak, then the mice start to war with each other. Right? Okay, now that the cats are gone, there's some morsels that are left out there on the carpet, and now it's every mouse get whatever you can. And so they're all grabbing for everybody else's stuff when the cats are weak. Does that make sense? And so as you walk through biblical history, what you find then is when those empires are weak, then you've got more mention of warfare between the Judahites or the Israelites and the other Amalekites, Kenites, Moabites, Ammonites, etc. Okay? And so it's very important to note who is in power during your particular biblical stories and setting. Okay? So is it a cat or is it a mouse? And what are the mice doing? All right? Make sense? Any questions about cats and mice? No questions about cats and mice? All right, those are the big concepts for us for tonight. All right, I want to move into one more thing then. Oh, before we do that, before we go to our last, I just want to tell you that that's Old Testament history. Right? You almost in the New Testament, you never hear about the Kenites, the Jebusites, the Moabites, the Ammonites anymore. Because there's a 400-year period between our Old Testament and our New Testament. Okay? And things change drastically in terms of politics and power between our Old Testament and our New Testament. In the Old Testament, you have Assyria and Babylon and Egypt as your major empires. But as soon as we move into the New Testament, open those first pages of the New Testament, who's in control of the world in the New Testament, politically? Rome is, right? And Rome has completely different ways of doing business than any of the other Assyrian empires before. Okay? There's a stage that completely changes from our Old Testament to our New Testament. In that 400 years, Greece rises to power first, and they bring order and culture to the whole world of their time. Now, Greece was in love with a lot of things. Mostly it was in love with culture and language. Okay? It wanted the whole world to have the gift of the Greek language. And so everywhere the Greek Empire went, it taught its people Greek. It wanted them to speak Greek, it wanted them to think like Greeks, and it wanted them to worship Greek gods, particularly. Okay? And so you've got a whole pantheon. You guys all studied them in junior high or high school, right? In Greek mythology. And you studied all the different gods that they had and all the culture that went along with that. You also probably in high school studied Greek philosophy, right? Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. You've heard of these guys, the morons you guys, yeah, none of you have seen Princess Bride? Okay, okay, the moron, yeah, anyway. Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. Okay, those were all your Greek philosophers as well. And so Greece was all about giving the gift of Greek culture to the rest of the world, whether that's by peace or by war, forcing that on the people they came across. Okay? So Greece really sets the stage for the Roman Empire to come along. And in fact, it really helps for the spread of the gospel, unintentionally, of course. But by the time we get to our New Testament, the Old Testament has been completely translated into Greek. And so now people from all over the empire, whether they know Hebrew or not, can learn about the God of Israel because they can read Greek. And so 200 years before Christ, the Bible, the Old Testament, was translated into Greek and prepares the way for our New Testament to come along as well. Okay? Some of you have heard of Septuagint. That's what it is, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And it's because of Greek scholarship and culture and language that table is set for the beginning of our New Testament. So Greece comes along, and then Rome right after it. Okay? And Rome is obviously up in the European part, comes down, and it takes over the Greek Empire. And Rome is not at all about language or culture. They love Greek language and culture, but they don't have much of their own. And so they take all the gods that we have from Greek mythology, and they simply take exactly the same gods and rename them with Roman names. And so now you have the same gods, but they have different names as we move into the Roman period. And so the Romans don't care so much about creativity, about culture. They just adopt almost wholesale what they've received from the Greeks. But Rome cares very much for a couple of other things. It cares about peace, and it cares about transportation. Because you have to have peace in order to maintain an empire like they wanted to. Okay? And so above all things, they want to make sure that throughout the empire, there is peace. And they make that peace by having a huge army. Makes sense, right? The key to having peace is having a big stick to wave at anybody who might threaten your peace. And so Rome has the hugest army of all time up to that point. And they use it to enforce the peace around. Okay? The other thing that they do is enforce transportation. They make, at first they build roads, but then they force the people who are living next to those roads to maintain those roads. I think it actually sounds a lot like California, in fact. I was thinking about that the other day. I was paying my gas tax over at Costco and putting a little bit of fuel in my car at the same time and thinking about all those roads that were supposed to be maintained in California with the taxes that we paid towards that. Anyway, that political discussion. But that idea comes straight from Rome, you guys. Tax the people who are living next to the road so that they maintain that road that's coming through there so that your empire can continue to exist. And that's what Rome did. Okay, so it made roads all over. You've heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome? That's true. But all roads lead to Rome through a place that we're going to talk about here in just a second as well. You can't get to Rome from all places without going through one particular place we've talked about a bit already. Okay, so Rome wants peace, and they want transportation. You guys, this is also setting the stage for the gospel as we come into the New Testament era, right? Because for the gospel to move rapidly from one place to another, there has to be peace. And what we find in our New Testament, in fact, you open up the book of Acts, and from about 40 AD to about 70 AD, the gospel moved all over the known world. In fact, to the point where Paul could say in Colossians chapter 1, that I have heard that your faith has been bearing fruit and growing just as it has all over the world, is what Paul says. By the time that Paul is an old man, by 70 AD or so, the gospel has moved from a very small place in Jerusalem out into the entire known world at that time. And it's possible because of Roman peace and Roman roads. But that's possible because of God, who made Roman peace and Roman roads possible as well. Does that make sense? God orchestrated all those things so that in one place, in one time, the gospel could have maximum success. And that brings us to our last map then on your page. Now we've focused in again. We were, one more back just for a second, Michael. Okay, so we're on this same map, and now we're going to focus in, and everything you see here is going to be the same except with different names. So I couldn't find another map that had the same names, and so you're going to go to the next page there. And so that great sea there is the Mediterranean, okay? Again, this map I've stolen from somebody else, and they didn't use the words that I would have used there, but the great sea is the Mediterranean. Elisha there is actually Cyprus, okay? And now we're looking again at the Promised Land in the center of our page there. So this is Israel right there in the middle. And you can find a couple of places on there. You see Megiddo. Unfortunately, it doesn't have Jerusalem on it, but Megiddo is right in the middle of that map, and it's also right in the middle of a highway, okay? And what map is showing us is the specific highway on which traffic moved from Asia and Europe down into Africa, or vice versa, from Africa up into Europe and Asia. And so you can see all the way down to the bottom left of that map, you see where it says Nof and On. Those two cities are in Egypt. Okay, these are major store cities in Egypt. And you can trace the road as it moves up along the coast. You see that? And partway, about midway up that road, it says Via Maris on it. Okay, and this is the major road for all traffic in ancient times. Via Maris means the way of the sea. The way of the sea, all right? And so that's what the traffic is doing. It's moving up along the sea coast there. And the best way to move your traffic is up on that flat coastal plain up through Israel there. So I want you to see that major highway. And then there's another highway that moves on the other side of Israel just before you get to the desert here. So it skirts right along the edge of the desert, and also along kind of a mountain tabletop area there. Okay, and this is called the King's Highway. The King's Highway we hear a lot about in the Old Testament, especially early in the Old Testament, when we're talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They move much more along the King's Highway. Once we get into later times like 1st and 2nd Kings, actually Judges and 1st and 2nd Kings, and even later than that, certainly our New Testament, the King's Highway is hardly ever used at all. We only have people moving on the Via Maris. Okay? So that's the major highway as it moves up through Israel. And what we'll look at in the coming weeks is we're going to zoom in even more. I'm going to show you what this looks like in more full color along the way too. We'll visit some of the places that are mentioned on this map here. But there's one particular feature I have to show you, a map. Okay, you see where it says Aruna Pass? You see that? There's a little bit of an arrow. It's right in the very middle of your map. It says Aruna Pass right next to Megiddo. So Aruna Pass, the word is actually written out there in the Great Sea. You guys finding that okay? Okay. The Aruna Pass is a very important place on our map, okay? Where we're seeing that is there's a little bit of a thumb that sticks out into the Great Sea. Can you see that? It's a little bump. As you're running up that coastline, there's just a little bump. It comes out like this and then immediately comes back down in. You see that? Just above the Aruna Pass there, okay? That bump is Mount Carmel. Okay, it's Mount Carmel. Now, we're not talking about Candyland here. It's not that Mount Carmel. Is it Mount Carmel in Candyland? No. This is Mount Carmel. Carmel means, Karam El, actually, means the vineyard of God, okay? It's a huge limestone mountain that sticks up in the middle of the sea coast there. And what it does is it interrupts the sea coast, okay? So it moves from a flat plain, a coastal plain, all the way up to a steep incline. And it makes it so all the traffic that's moving up that Via Maris has to turn right. You see that? It comes inland a little bit at that point, okay? That's because there's a mountain in the way, right? You're strolling along a nice flat coastal plain. All of a sudden you run smack into a mountain. And it forces you either to go into the sea, which you don't want to do, obviously, or to turn further inland and find a pass, a way through that mountain. And that's what's called the Aruna Pass here on this, okay? The Aruna Pass is what's called a choke point. A choke point on the pass there, or on the path, on the highway, okay? There's several choke points as you drive through Los Angeles. The one that I'm probably least fond of is the one where the 5 comes down to 1 lane, right, as you're headed down towards Anaheim. Right, you guys know what I'm talking about? Anybody ever driven on the 5 before? It comes down, like, you go from like 4 lanes down to 1 lane for the 5, right? And all the trucks and everybody has to merge and all of that, and then eventually winds out again, right? That's a choke point, and that's what causes traffic to really slow down at that point, right? You get it on the 405 too when you're about to go up the hill, right? Everybody slows down just about to go up that hill or down the hill, right? So it's a choke point. Always there's traffic there. It always has to stop or go much slower there. And that's what you get when you get all these armies, all these caravans moving up this highway. They're going to run into that mountain, and then they're going to have to take a pass through that mountain, and it's going to slow that traffic down. It also makes it very perilous, right? If you're moving an army and you've got a mountain and you've got to pass through that mountain, so you've got 2 steep hills on each side, and you've got traffic flowing between them, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Guerrilla warfare, people up on that mountain throwing rocks down on the traffic coming through, right? If you want to stop that, you have to control that pass. And so you want to build a fortress on each side of that pass to make sure that your traffic can get through, right? If you're the cat, let's say. So if you're the cat, you want to protect all of your army and caravans moving through there. If you're a mouse, you want to attack all that traffic coming through there and flee with all the goods that are coming through, right? Oh, good, we can rob everybody walking through here, okay? So you can either pay taxes to the cat to move your traffic straight through there. Taxes were very important and very popular for the Romans and Greeks and Egyptians and Syrians and Babylonians. That was the way they made their money, was taxing the traffic that came through there, ensuring their safety, right? As long as they made it through that pass. Now, who was the one who was most likely? It's like a protection racket. You know, we'll hear about that a lot in biblical history, right? So you ever hear of a protection racket? You hear about it in movies and things like that, right? The mob comes and they knock on your door as a small businessman and they say, hey, it looks like this is a very dangerous place to have a business, right? But I can keep you safe. Who are they saying they're going to keep you safe from, actually? Themselves, right? You're paying me not to come beat you up, right? That's basically what's going on there too, right? The Romans can say, yeah, all the traffic who passes through here, they just pay us, and they won't have to worry about anybody attacking them. Anybody who attacked them would be the Romans themselves, okay? So we're going to protect you. You're going to protect yourself from us by paying taxes to us, right? So that's a choke point and a very important strategic place. That's why Megiddo will become very important as we talk about biblical history in the coming weeks. All right, you guys tired of hearing my voice for a little bit? You want to see some color images of what Israel actually looks like? So this is a little video that I've taken from YouTube to show you what Israel looks like in full color. And it just shows you a representation. It'll show you some of that coastal plain. You're going to see Caesarea on there. You'll see some of the mountains. You'll see some of the fertile plains there. You'll see the desert areas as well. So this just gives you a kind of a representative sample of what Israel looks like. Oh, before we do that, a couple of pictures. This is the Jezreel Valley. This is actually looking down on Megiddo from that mountain, from Mount Carmel. Okay, so this is the mountain, and you're looking down into the valley below. And so one of the passes is actually right through here. The Yokneam Pass runs right through here. And so this is a great strategic spot for watching traffic on this side and on that side and watching everybody try to go by on the pass. Well, would somebody mind hitting that light? Just one of those lights back there for me. This is another picture of the Jezreel Valley, looking across it actually. Green area here, mostly flat, a tremendously fertile place for growing crops. Not a very large place. Actually, it reminds me always of when you come down the Grapevine, right, and you're coming down into Bakersfield. You come into, what is that, San Joaquin Valley, is that what it's called down there? It really widens out, and you've got hills up on one side, right? They kind of border it on that side, and then it kind of widens out towards the ocean. This is what it looks like when you come down off of the Carmel pass there, down one of the passes, and you're looking into the Jezreel Valley. It looks just like that. In the background, you've got Mount Gilboa. Mount Tabor is to our left over here. That's what that looks like. One more. Okay, this is the video. So take some time and let's watch this one. Just a few minutes, 9 minutes or so of video. You're welcome to. There should be sound, but it's not crucial. You hear the choir. The choir is our soundtrack for this. Oh, yeah, we got a little bit of sound. You're welcome to get up and move around too if you want to see it better. Oh, this is one of my favorite places. This is from Joppa, looking into Tel Aviv. This is where Jonah sailed from, you guys. This is his port of sailing. You're also right now right on top of the very place where Peter had his vision of the blanket coming down with all the animals in it. God says to him, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat," before he goes to see Cornelius. This is the very spot where that happened. That church is built to commemorate that. That's the Mediterranean. You guys wish you were at the Mediterranean? Well, it's only like 50 degrees and raining right now at the Mediterranean. So right at this spot, it's about 50 degrees and raining right now. So not in June, though. It'll be much hotter than that in June. Caesarea, we'll get to this in a couple of weeks. It's the hippodrome built by Herod for racing chariots and horses. You can see it held about 30,000 people. You could sit in those stands and watch horse races, chariots, bet on them. This is the port that Herod built there, and we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. And his palace was sat right there. Megiddo itself, which we'll talk about next week. You guys remember Armageddon from our Old and New Testament? This Megiddo is the namesake for that. This is probably in about March or April, so you still have a lot of greenery. When we get there in June, it won't be this green. Well, this also will be more brown when we see it, but yeah, it's actually a lot like here. When you're driving down, even down below, and you're driving through Acton and down past that, it's very similar to what this looks like. So Jerusalem is about the same latitude as San Diego is. So we're very much in a similar ecological zone, I guess you'd say, to what Israel is, where we are. This is Gamla. We don't go to Gamla, but it's up in the Golan Heights. It was kind of a fortress. Actually, where they're standing there is an old synagogue, first century synagogue, second century synagogue in Gamla. This is what the hill country looks like. Central Hill Country, Central Benjamin Plateau, but this is actually the Golan Heights as well. Yeah, Sea of Galilee here, you guys. A little bit more of an overcast day there. Sea of Galilee is about 14 and a half miles long and about 7 miles wide. Caesarea Philippi is all the way up in the north of Israel. This is the headwaters, well, close to the headwaters of the Jordan River. It is like that in June. This is what it looks like in June. Beautiful green water. So this is down in the Negev, down in the south. On the desert areas, right? When we go there, it'll be about 110 to 115 degrees in June. It's a dry heat, though, right? It is very much like here. There. Dead Sea. So we'll spend some time there, get your feet wet, and maybe float around for a bit in the Dead Sea. I always tell people you have to do that once, but I don't have to do it more than once. Yeah. I think it's nasty, honestly. But whatever. Yeah, Scythopolis. This is one of my favorite places, Beit Shan. You're actually looking down from Beit Shan into Scythopolis here. Some of the most spectacularly preserved Roman ruins. You can walk along the street, colonnaded street, and feel like you were in a Roman. This is right now what you're doing. That's the ancient city of Scythopolis up here. King Saul's body was hung on that hill after he was killed by the Philistines. Now you're up in it's up in Galilee, Lower Galilee. So Gideon's Spring there. And Gedi back in down by the Dead Sea. So really diverse land. Like it's not very big, but a lot of different kinds of topography and nature. This is Jerusalem, obviously. This is on the southern steps of the temple. Southern steps? Yeah, southern steps. Hezekiah's tunnel, which we will walk through. It's awesome. Here's the western wall for the Temple Mount. The western wall actually is not from the temple. The western wall is the retaining wall for the platform on which Herod built his temple. So the stones that are there are not from the temple. They're from the foundation on which the temple was built. We'll walk right along that street there. This is first century street, so this is a street that Jesus definitely would have walked on. This is how he would have gone to walk towards the temple. Southern entrance to the temple, probably, or close to it. And this is looking from the Mount of Olives into Jerusalem. One of the best views that you get on the whole trip. It's fantastic. Garden of Gethsemane too. I think this is expectation shattering when you see that. You don't really know what to expect when you see the Garden of Gethsemane. The garden tomb here. So this is a first century era tomb. Probably not the one where Jesus was buried, but something similar to it. That's it. So you can watch that one on your own. If you look for Israel in 4K, if you go to YouTube and look for Israel in 4K, you can review that video on your own. If you wouldn't mind, turn those lights back on for me for a minute. All right, that's much of what we have for tonight. I just want to entertain any kind of questions that you have. Questions or comments or anything?
What was the writing on the wall
In the tomb? So it's probably Byzantine era, just graffiti. It had a cross in it. It had a few just different letters around it. So I don't know really the significance of all that, but yeah. No questions, you guys? Yes, please, Greg.
So I just was reading about it, just in our reading it just come up. So I mean, I'm sure it's wiped out. So
Yeah.
where would it be?
It would have been south of the Dead Sea area.
Okay.
So actually up here on your map, this big map here, actually you have it as well on one of your maps. You have the Dead Sea, I think.
Yep.
See how now the Dead Sea is split into two here? There's a little like a peninsula that runs across it here. That's because it's shrinking. Okay, the water is evaporating and a lot of water isn't being added into it anymore. So the Jordan River used to flow a lot more briskly than it does now, a lot more water coming through that area. And actually, before Abraham, right, before Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, this whole area all the way through here would have been a lake, like continuous lake all the way from the Sea of Galilee up to the north, all the way down here. But what I think happened is that when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, they were actually located down here, and it says there was fire and brimstone. And so I think what happened is actually that destruction dammed up this area down here. And so that's what caused the Dead Sea actually to die, is because there's now no outlet to the Dead Sea. I think it would have flowed eventually all the way down to the Red Sea, which is all the way down here at the bottom, okay? I think there would have been flowing water all the way down from the north, from Mount Hebron, where the Jordan River starts, all the way down here to the Red Sea. But because that was dammed up with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and actually they were buried completely, it stopped that flow and killed the Dead Sea. And so that's, all this is minerals all over the place there, and so the combination of that evaporation and the saturation of minerals caused there to be no possibility of life in there, and that saltiness, that mineral content, is what rose from that point. So, and it's actually rising by the day now because of the evaporation and lack of more water flowing into the Dead Sea. So it's shrinking and is becoming more salty in our day. Interestingly, Israel is actually now doing a project where they're thinking about, and they may have already started, pumping water all the way down here from the Red Sea up into the Dead Sea to try to restock some of that water that's been depleted from it. Nobody knows what that's going to do, or how much that's going to cost, or what effect that's going to have. But right now, because the Dead Sea is shrinking so much, that whole area has sinkholes. Because as that water evaporates, it leaves behind caves underground, and now the ground on top of that is thin and eroding, and so it all just collapses, and it happens suddenly and devastatingly. And so it's so they're thinking about ways to revive the Dead Sea and to keep it as it's been a tourist attraction since the pharaohs and before. People have come from all over the world to see it and to float in it and all that. It's one of a natural wonder of the world. There's nothing like it. It's 1,500 feet below sea level, so it's there's nothing like it. So Israel is trying to protect it, and by bringing in water from the Red Sea up that way. So we'll see what happens with that. Good question, Greg. What else? Yes, April. Scythopolis, you mean? So it is Beit Shan, Scythopolis. Let's see. On your map, it's going to be right about here. So north of the Dead Sea, north of Jerusalem. I don't know. Can you go back to our map, to an Israel map back there? So, back, next one. This one here. So Scythopolis is about in here. Ooh, oh, yeah, good. Right in about this area.
Is it mentioned in the scripture at all?
Beit Shan is. Beit Shan is. That's where Saul's body was hung on the wall after he was killed by the Jebusites, by the Philistines. They took his body and Jonathan's body and hung it on the wall there. So it's mentioned there in one other place as well. It's interesting, Jesus seems to have avoided in the New Testament times that it wasn't a place where, it would have been a huge place population-wise, but it's seemingly Jesus avoided it during his ministry. Didn't go through that area. So it's the only part of the Decapolis that is on the western side of the Jordan River. The rest of the Decapolis cities are all here on the other side. But yeah, it was the biggest city of the Decapolis, and it was the only one on the western side of the Jordan River. So yeah, part of that. So yeah, Jesus did spend time in the Decapolis, but we think it was almost all on the eastern side of the Jordan, not on the western side there. Other questions? No questions? All right, you guys want to be first in line to donuts then? All right, come back next week, and we'll zoom in a little bit more, and we'll talk about the 5 areas of the land of Israel itself and spend some time in that. So thanks, you guys. Have a great evening.